Welcome back to the Becoming Young podcast, where we are dedicated to unlocking the secrets of living a longer, healthier life. I'm Josh, and here with Janae, who's enchanting and sometimes a little coy. But today we truly have an exceptional guest who's transformed yoga, sports performance, and wellness worldwide, Baron Baptiste. Baron is a global entrepreneur, a best-selling author with titles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today, and the founder of Baptiste Yoga Worldwide, with over 220 locations and thousands of certified trainers globally. He's also an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker with his documentary Inspire Change, winning 5 Emmys for the most inspiring short film. Baron has served 5 years as a peak performance specialist with the Philadelphia Eagles, has worked with elite athletes all over the world in the NFL, NBA, NHL, and Olympians to push their physical and mental limits. And as a legacy global ambassador for Lululemon for 12 years and a regular guest on shows like Good Morning America, The Today Show, The Kelly and Regis Show, he has inspired millions to take charge of their health and well-being, and was also featured as one of People Magazine's Sexiest Men Alive. So today, Baron's here to share his insights on longevity, peak performance, and holistic health that can help us all live longer, healthier lives. It doesn't matter whether you're an athlete or a busy professional or passionate about optimizing your health. I know his wisdom is going to be here to inspire and inform us. So without further ado, Baron, welcome to the Becoming Young podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And we're really so happy you are here. So Baron and I have been running around in similar social circles. We both live in the same state, which is why I am so lucky to be here in his studio. Now, I need to just quickly tell you how my first impressions went of Baron. So this guy walks in with a presence. We're at the Vibe Room. This is at Edison House, downtown Salt Lake. We're doing this networking event. This guy walks in with this presence, and I'm like, who is that? So then he starts talking, and all of these words of wisdom are spewing it out of his mouth in just such a very nonchalant, just very giving type way. And I'm thinking to myself, really, like, who is this person? So then somebody pointed out, that's Baron. He has all these yoga studios, and he has a podcast, and he does all these really cool things. And I'm like, what? So as I slowly have gotten to know him over the past, I'd say probably a year or so, it's like this layered onion I keep peeling. It's like, you do that too. You do that too. It's not just yoga. This is a man of many, many talents. And we are here in his beautiful in-home studio in one of the most beautiful places in the world with all of the changing leaves outside. And it's pretty incredible. So without further ado, Baron, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, but also for you to be able to share the wisdom that you have gleaned over the years of truly being able to live a life in flow. Now, flow is kind of one of those like buzzwords, right? But this is a man who knows how to do it with some intensity that creates results, but also makes a difference in people's lives, like Josh said in the intro. So that's kind of where I want to go with this. First of all, you have over 200 yoga studios. And my first question for you is, what drew you to yoga and what's different about what you do within your yoga world?
Yeah, good question. And thank you for such the warm welcome and introduction. Like, wow, something to live up to here.
Yeah, well, and trust me, he lives way surpassing that I'm just scratching the surface on who this person is, but
I'll take it.
It's a little taste.
I'll take it. Thank you. So my parents were revolutionaries in yoga, health. My father was an early Mr. America, physical culture, like back in the 1950s and actually 40s for my dad, was a real revolutionary. His father got him into Eastern teachings, Eastern philosophy, yoga, meditation. And my dad integrated kind of the best of the East, best of the West. And when I say best, my dad was a really practical man. So he would take the practices of the East and then Western physical culture and psychology and merge them in practical ways. So he was always interested in what are the practical practices, practical tools, practical ways of living that people could apply to life. So he wasn't so much into the kind of theory and concepts and philosophy, but it was more deliberate, like what will make an impact, what will make a result for someone immediately in their life. And I think I took on that mindset.
Okay.
And that became, so growing up around yoga, my parents would take me to India, and when I was starting around 10 years old, and we'd go to different ashrams and study with different teachers and gurus. And as a kid, I kind of rolled my eyes at it. But as I got older and like in my early 20s, I realized, wait, there's something practical here. As I was feeling, being on my own, the stress of life, the confusion, I was kind of lost, but I realized I had some tools that I had grown up with. But I never related to all the kind of woo-woo, new agey, kind of Hindu stuff around yoga. So I kept kind of, as I was practicing, I was like, well, I like the physical practice, the physical poses, the deep breathing, the concentration, the focus of your mind, the getting present, like physically, like getting present to your body, meditation in a way that was really practical for living life every day and dealing with stress, and just, again, getting present in my life. And so I started practicing things that were working for me more and more. And as I became more present, I had some skills, I started sharing it, started teaching. And then my thrust became, well, I want to make this like yoga practice and these kind of somewhat, what occurs to most people as esoteric practices, to make them really practical and useful. And as I was using them in my own life. And so I went on to kind of keep stripping away the new agey stuff, the woo-woo stuff, the theory, and creating like a methodology. Is what I ended up doing, is creating a method that was really simple, really practical, really accessible to people from all walks of life. So people that you wouldn't typically would think would practice something like yoga, it became really accessible. Once they try it, they're like, wow, they felt immediately better. And then I would evolve my classes to really make them really, available to, again, all kind of different levels of physicality. If you're a professional sitter or you're a professional athlete, I wanted my classes to be relatable and accessible with good results for people. So I kept evolving my classes, and then they grew. They just blew up kind of out of the stratosphere. Certain point in LA, I had like 2,000 people a week coming through my classes. And I realized, and I was probably teaching like 25 classes a week, had 20 privates on top of that.
Point of maybe even almost burnout in teaching.
Oh, yeah. No, I was like, hey, this is not sustainable. So that's when I started training other teachers, other trainers. So I was like, hey, I need to scale myself. I need to duplicate myself and what I do, so others could teach the classes, so I would get freed up. So it kind of started there.
Okay. So there's definitely an entrepreneurial spirit there with that, which I like.
Yeah.
Also, it kind of sounds like your dad was a little bit ahead of his time, where he had this very intense physical connection with life. And you said he was in Mr. America and did some bodybuilding. And how much of that was inspired by, okay, you're in the bodybuilding world, but then where's the functionality within that? You see these big muscular guys, and they can hardly move. I'm just wondering if that was part of the reason why he was drawn to that.
Yeah, I think so. So I think two things. Back in that era, that was before drugs or steroids or, pumping themselves up artificially. So it was very natural. And back then, bodybuilding included a lot of calisthenics and gymnastics. And
so there was a lot more functional movement within building. Okay.
Yeah. But I think what really attracted my dad to the kind of yoga and Eastern philosophy was the mind side. Because it was so like in Western bodybuilding was so just like physical oriented, as it still can be typically.
Yeah.
But now he really got into the mindset, like mind connected to body, and that integration, that alignment of mind, body, and then spirit as well. So he started bringing in more meditation and practices, like and philosophical practices that were practical. You could call them personal development, but kind of leaning more toward, okay, you're a spiritual being, so you need to create your own spiritual fitness and spiritual well-being, because that impacts the mind, the body, kind of the whole person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is an interesting point because there were many years where I was really into yoga and meditation. And I had this inspiration on my mat one day where I was just laying there in Savasana, which is the resting pose. And it was that I've created more change within my body laying here on my mat than any physical exercise that I've ever done, as far as like bodybuilding and changing my shape and my strength and my ability to engage with my body. That was a really interesting insight for me because it just kind of came out of nowhere, but it also felt really true. And it sounds to me like you've really been able to grasp and embody those principles in a way for people to be able to, like you said, see results from doing yoga. Because I think one of the hard things for people going into like a yoga, it's like, oh yeah, men can do yoga. I know yoga is good for me, but there's all these barriers, like, oh, it's more of a girl thing, or it's I'm not flexible at all, or all these excuses we can come up with. But what you're saying is the practical results that come from really being able to connect with your body in a way that creates physical results. And then you add the mind, the spirit, and connect it all to the body. It sounds like that's kind of this unique spin you have on this.
Yeah. And growing up, I was always an athlete. I was a competitive surfer, skateboarder. I was California state champion for Taekwondo.
Okay.
So as a martial artist,
Okay. Looking at this guy, you wouldn't think yoga guy, which is another reason why when I met him, very intriguing because, he had all this business wisdom and insight. We were kind of in like business groups together. Right. And then, also like you're kind of muscular. You don't really look like you would necessarily be super flexible, but then again, you start talking to Baron and you hear all of these experiences he has that are just like so unique to this life that you've led.
Well, that was one of the things with yoga. So again, in kind of dismantling the aspects of it that I didn't like, again, I was super like athletic, but what I noticed with a lot of yoga men is they get more kind of effeminate or super skinny bodies. And it kind of like, it's like, I don't really want to look like that.
Right.
And why, if I'm a guy, an athletic guy, why would I want to train or develop myself like that? And I think, so I just created Baptiste yoga. My version of it is a practice that guys, men, like anyone could relate to. And that was really my thrust. It's like, well, what do I relate to? And so I think what happened with me is a lot of men started doing my style of yoga because it was athletic, it was physical. You weren't going to turn into a little kind of effeminate yogi. Not to insult anybody, right. But yeah.
It's not about being gender specific. We're kind of like digging into stereotypes here, but these stereotypes are also the reason why people have these barriers into getting into something that's really truly good for them on a physical level that increases strength, that increases your ability to perform, not just in the gym, but also in every aspect of your life, sexually, mentally, physically, right, Josh?
Absolutely. Sorry, we're remote here, so I'm like trying to make sure that I'm not cutting Janae off. But what I was going to say is, it's funny, right? As men, specifically, we don't talk about this stuff and how it potentially makes us feel, or, we just sort of avoid certain things if it doesn't fit into whatever our narrative is, right? And Baron, so I had some mental health struggles in my late 30s and ended up on meds. And so I took myself off meds through breath work and meditation. And actually I do, it's not the same kind of yoga, but I do yoga nidra, right? Like multiple times a week. And I think men in general, like I can see why this would have caught on, right? Because I don't think men typically are exposed to things like this that have such an introspective and like soul connecting sort of experience, right? Like we don't talk about things that are affecting our nervous system and allowing us to be in the moment and sort of be at peace with ourselves. And so this is that type of practice that connects us in that way. And that's that's why it's so powerful, I think, especially for men, right? I mean, everybody obviously benefits, and we'll talk about some of the aging benefits, but I think that's, to me, that's what sticks out, right, as a man. And I can totally see why this is something that would really draw men in, right? Because of taking away sort of the stigma is not the right word, but sort of what the expected, like, what's expected, right? It's like, you think of yoga, it's expected that you go walk into a room full of, women in yoga pants, right? Which, I don't know, that sounds pretty good to me.
Which
but
can be good too.
Right.
But is it safe to say, I mean, if I were to just give this an overview, this is kind of like dude yoga. I mean, of course, anyone can do it. But, and I'm like this as well, I like to see practical results. So I've been to many different types of yoga, and I actually stepped away from yoga for a long time because I didn't feel like it was really connecting with what I wanted. It just started becoming another thing to do on my list. And so this, in a way, kind of solves that problem, takes away the barriers, but then also shows how palatable the results can be with this. And if you are engaging in a health practice without the aspects of yoga, what is it that you're missing? And if you're looking at a whole longevity plan for your life, what things could you be missing if you're not doing yoga because you're afraid or because you don't want to, do a certain type of yoga?
Yeah. So, it's, it's state of, I'll just say it like that. There's our state of mind, state of body, state of being, our beingness, our spiritual beingness, whatever you want to call it. And we have the ability to, we have say in the matter of our mind, state of mind. Now we aren't educated that in the popular marketplace and big pharma, and we're always culture is always sending us messages. Well, just take a pill, and you like treat the symptoms. But when you get into these practices like yoga that really integrates, it's by its very nature with it integrates body, movement, breath, focus, attention. It's like meditative movement. That shifts your mind in a very unique way. And different than, I love lifting weights. I love getting out and doing different kind of forms of exercise or athleticism. But there's something about yoga and the integration. And when you start practicing, you start realizing, like, wait, I can do things that shift my mind. If you sit and meditate and you really take on a meditation practice, you start saying, well, wait, I do have say in my state of mind.
Yeah.
State of mind impacts body, and you move your body and you breathe, and that impacts your mind state. And then, your spiritual state of being, like doing practices that alter maybe the default, what I like to call the drift. We drift along in life, and mentally we're feeling a certain way, physically we're feeling a certain way.
And it's easy to get caught up in that drift without knowing that you have more power than you realize to shift that.
Yeah. And then we treat the symptoms when we're in that drift. We're in that default state of mind, body, and being that's not working for us. We're in the experience of having lost ourselves, disempowered.
And I'm wondering, I'm just hearing you describe this, and I'm feeling like you're describing my life, my mentality, but how many of our listeners could also relate to that exact experience in the mind, feeling like I'm drifting, I don't know what I'm doing, nothing I'm doing is working out the first time, right, Josh? just the challenges that we face as human beings in everyday life, and then allowing us to look at these tools and say, how much more empowered am I because of this?
Yeah, because the truth of it is that we are in habitual patterns. So we're in unconscious habits, unconscious patterns. You could call those are practices. Something done consistently over time, cumulatively creates results.
Right.
And those are what I would call unintentional or unconscious practices that we're doing, patterns that we're doing that are not giving us the results we want. But then there's something about deliberate practice. When you start taking on deliberate practice of things that impact mind, state of body, state of being. And I'll say it like this, there's our states, and then there's a story that comes out of our state of mind, our state of body, our state of being. We're given a story, and we live in that story.
Too, right?
Yeah, and if it's not a good story, that's telling you probably you're in unintentional practices and patterns in life that are giving you these stories. And then you have from there your strategies in life, the actions you take, the things you do or don't do. But the strategies to survive life, and now we're in survival, we're living a reactive life. Well, if you kind of flip that and you start taking responsibility for your state of mind, state of body, you get a new story. And it's a moment-to-moment thing. It's one day at a time, moment to moment. If I wake up in the morning and I just feel off kilter, feel off center, it's like, well, what do I need to do? What deliberate practice to disrupt that, shift my state of mind, state of body, state of being, that gives me a different story, a different outlook of life, outlook of myself, that gives me a different strategy that day. If I'm a different human being if in the morning I meditate, I yoga practice, or I train of some kind, or get outside in nature, that shifts me into a totally different outlook, different story I'm living in. And it gives me a different strategy. I'm a different human being in how I'm relating to life, relating to other people, less reactive, moving, breathing, having my being from my center versus off center, out of alignment.
And it sounds to me like what you're identifying here is a process that we all go through as humans. So it starts from this place of, we're feeling something. And if it's how you wake up in the morning, or if it's caused by something, right? And then you tell yourself a story, and then you come up with a to-do based on what the story is telling you. And what you're saying is, when you intentionally engage in this process with yourself, it's allowing you to empower yourself in a way to really be able to have complete control's the wrong word, but you really get to choose how you engage in these processes that are happening, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how good or challenging your life is. It's all going to happen. So creating these intentions and allowing yourself the power to choose your mind state and your story, and then from there having the tools. And so within your yoga practice, do you have what are the most specific tools that you use to really be able to take control of how you do this for yourself?
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, firstly, we can wait around. So if we're in a bunch of thoughts or a story that's disempowering, that's negative, that diminishes you, that makes you feel like something's just wrong, in the background a lot, we can have that experience of like, there's just something wrong.
Yeah, because I know this inherently. I know that that's true, but I still find myself saying, oh, I'm so dumb that I did this, or, whatever the words are, because I don't actually think I'm dumb, but how often are you talking to yourself without realizing what you're saying?
Yeah, it's unconscious.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is where you're saying this accumulation, when you're building these intentional habits and the words you're using start to shift that. And then unconsciously you start using more positive and empowering words as well.
Yeah. And the default is to think like, if I can get my thinking right, then I'll take the right actions or have the right responses. But what I've learned anyhow for myself is to take actions that are constructive, again, constructive habits, constructive deliberate practices, that then once I'm in the action of doing something, implementing it, applying it, doing the thing, then I get a different kind of thinking. Rather than, I think the default for human beings is we try to get our thinking right, then we'll take the right actions. But no, get in action, doing things that are constructive in managing, regulating your state of mind, state of body, state of being is a regular, deliberate practice. You brought up flow earlier. And I'm not a big believer. I'm not a big believer in flow as a goal. I'll say it like that.
I like that. Because that's why I say it's a buzzword. Like, what does that really mean? It's like, I'm so in flow. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
My life feels completely out of flow.
Yeah. And right. And it's like flow is a real thing. And we all have that experience of being in a flow state. But for me, and what I spent years and years like practicing yoga, like 3 hours a day, and really getting some mastery over yoga practice.
Which is impressive.
The
'cause I've never done it 3
poses,
hours. That's not true. I have done
yeah.
it 3
Yeah.
hours.
If you look at my book, Journey
not
into
for
Power, you'll see that like I'm looking pretty good in there. But that came from a lot of deliberate practice. And so I'm more of a believer in deliberate practice. And when you're really practicing something, you bring a discipline to it, there's a lot of pain involved, as you know, right?
Yeah.
You've trained, and I don't know your background, Josh, as much. I know she's dedicated herself to training and with rigor and discipline in certain respects and in certain modalities. But my point is, when you practice, you are always grappling with yourself. For me, it's like I never want to do it, but I step in front of that thought and do the thing anyway. As Emerson said, do the thing and you'll have the power. But when you deliberately practice something, then naturally, organically, you enter flow states. But it's not, you just can't call it per se.
Right.
If you see athletes like a Michael Jordan or LeBron James, or when they're playing, that's a demonstration of a lot of years and years of deliberate practice, a lot of painful practice, a lot of discomfort, confronting the comfort zone. But then they have access to a flow state. And
that makes a lot of sense. So
yeah,
you create it through resistance, really.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of talk, like you said, it's kind of a buzzword, flow state, where people are just, well, I don't want the practice or the difficult part of it. I just want the flow state.
But true flow state, you really don't have access to unless you're pushing against the hard things that are painful. Really.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think overall, right? I mean, what in life do you get that is positive unless there is a little bit of resistance, right? I mean, you can talk about aging, you can talk about building muscle, you can talk about getting healthy, whatever that is, right? Going to the gym and lifting heavy 4 or 5 days a week, like that's a lot of resistance, not just literally, but figuratively, right? I mean, like I know a lot of times I sit outside the gym and you got to have the action. The action spurs the motivation, right? Even our own bodies, right? The act of fasting spurs the autophagy in order to renew and kind of get rid of some of that stuff that's going on inside that is like, bad cells and all that kind of stuff. So there is so much good that happens from leaning into that. I mean, I don't want to say pain because it's not always pain, but the hardship, right? And the difficult stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you bring up another good word within the world that we're living in, and that's autophagy. And if you could just explain to our listeners exactly what autophagy is, because I think it's a really important aspect of how all of these practices fit into our life, because it's kind of like a describing word for something that's happening in our body when we're fasting and getting cleaned out, but also translates into the yoga world. So can you just explain that?
Yeah. So, I mean, very simply, right? Autophagy is the cellular process where your body like starts going under some sort of stress, and then it starts going, well, what do I need to do now? And it goes after your weak cells, the stuff that's sort of like starting to die off, right? And it keeps you young. It really does, right? Because it takes that stuff that's slowing you down, that might be a little inflammatory, whatever the case may be, and it goes in there and it kind of cleans it out. So it really is it's a maintenance mode, right? And so there's a lot of different things.
Yeah. And so this also allows your body to discard the things that it doesn't. Whereas when you are not in autophagy, where you don't have things calm and smooth so that you can see what it is that you're looking at with the resistance, right? Things keep piling up. So you don't have the clearing out space. So within the body, you create autophagy through fasting, right, Josh?
Well, a number of different things, but yes, like fasting would be one of those things. I mean, you can do that with a sauna, right? A sauna would do that. I mean, anything that's putting the body into stress when the body basically is like, what the hell's happening, right? And it starts to go, we need to adapt, and now we need to use more energy, and where are we getting this energy? And the first place it can go is, we need to get efficient, right? And so it goes in there and starts doing that. So yeah, a lot of different ways.
And so I'm seeing this similar to your mindset, within the body. This is the body's way of cleaning out, but also spiritually and within your mind, it sounds like it's really necessary to create like what I would consider like an autophagy state, right? Even though it's not necessarily called that in your mind, to be able to
I love
really
that, Janae. I really like that.
Yeah, really connect with this. And this is why I wanted to talk about this, because autophagy keeps you younger. Because if your body's not able to get rid of all that stuff, it piles and piles up. So my closet, for example, my closet and I are going through an autophagy state right now. I've just taken everything out. But before that, things were piling and piling up. And how often does that happen in your mind? And, this is where the different ways men and women deal with stress. I feel like women are really good at multitasking. And, for me, I'm a mom and I'm taking care of the kids and I'm doing all these things. And I think I'm doing everything. And then I listen to a man and I hear in his hardships, he feels like he's taking on everything in his world. And it's just as difficult in his world as it is in my world. And that's one of the things that was really kind of eye-opening to me, is that men feel just as overwhelmed as women, but they process it differently, which is why I love having Baron talk about his experience, your experience with yoga, because this is one of those things that, women are always encouraged to get together and go to yoga and do deep breathing and, have these really great experiences. And men are always welcome to do this in these environments, but it's just not quite and hasn't been quite as readily available to men to use as a tool in that state of overwhelm that's just as intense as it is for women.
Yeah.
And so, I guess my question is,
I'll say one thing about that, just in a nutshell. So when I first started teaching yoga back in the 90s, it was like 80, 90% women, not a lot of men.
Right.
And I think, it's a cultural thing. And it's like, those kind of things, inner introspection or yoga or things like that, that's a woman's game.
Right.
That's a woman's thing. And I think it's cultural. I think now, the world we live in now in 2024, there's much more openness and availability for men. But I still think women are more naturally gravitate toward that kind of inner, contemplation, more contemplative work, more self inquiry. It's like more natural. And I think culturally men just have a barrier around that.
Right. Well, there's kind of an expectation to hold, all the problems and the physical, the physical bearing of, the world's work. I mean, this can go into lots of different topics around this, but, men tend to do the very hard physical labor of the world to build the world, right? And women tend to do the very hard physical labor of supporting all of that. And, it's just one of those things where as we're integrating more the availability to each of us as humans to be able to make contact with what it is that we need within ourselves to be able to truly live the fullest lives we can. That's what I see almost as kind of part of your mission in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really
I think
powerful.
So. When you're speaking to, what's that word? Autophagy.
Yeah.
Autophagy. Yeah. What I hear in that too is like a deliberate practice, right? It's like when we're unintentional and we have these unintentional habitual patterns, the default is clutter, just more internally within our bodies, our minds. Yeah. And then we're in this state of overwhelm. And then that for men and women. And like to your point, it's processed differently. I see that, in men and women, how it's handled. But we all have this default reality that we just live in until we become intentional and take on being deliberate in altering what's possible and being on a different trajectory. Shakespeare said, you know who you are and you know not who you could be. And I think we know who we are in the default state, but to start to discover who we can be in life takes something deliberate. And that from whether that's detoxing and then taking on practices, the autophagy to me is an intentional practice different than just the unintentional, right?
Yeah. And so this cleaning out process in all aspects of our lives also allows us to build a brand new default setting.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. That's a good
and
goal.
and I think this is such, I mean, like this is a softball, right? Because I think as we talk about aging, right? And how do we, when I talk with clients, right? So Baron, I coach a lot of clients on really slowing the rate of aging and optimizing what's going on at the cellular level. And when I talk with clients, I talk with them about changing that mindset, changing that default mode of how they feel about how they should be feeling, how they should be aging, what that entire mindset is it's a very important part of the process to really reset what those expectations are. And so I would ask you, you've been doing this a long time. What do you see anecdotally, right? What do you see with the thousands of people that you've had in class that you've taught your method to? What are you seeing specifically as far as helping them age better? Are you seeing that the yoga is providing them? I mean, we talked a lot just a minute ago about mental health and sort of the clarity and the being in the moment. What else are you seeing that you could point to and say, hey, this is really positively affecting folks as they age?
Well, I think taking on practices like yoga practice, even meditation practice, and any kind of really deliberate practice that is healthy for you, there's healthy stress, right? There's stress that makes you stronger. There's stress that makes you freer. There's stress that unencumbers you, unburdens you. And then there's the unhealthy stress that is just a burden. But taking on things that are stressful, but they stress your biochemistry, they stress your mental and physical, your muscle, your bones, your things that are, you need stressors, but stressors that are healthy. And those kind of stressors, when done over time, create a kind of transformation. And I think that, and then you start walking through life lighter, freer. And to me, that with a different outlook, living in a different story and having a different strategy, a less reactive life, to me, that is the fountain of youth. Also, the practice of giving things up, letting things go. Like, what can you subtract out of your life that's just that excess clutter? There's so much added on. And just small things. I call it traffic, but mental traffic. You could say things that are just pulling on your mind and taking your attention out of the way. Whether that, if I speak as an entrepreneur, let's say a staff person says, okay, they're going to do something. And we have a conversation. They say they're going to do something. And then a few weeks later, I wake up at 3 a.m. I'm like, wait, did that thing get done? Because they didn't report back to me that they completed it. So it's like, well, to me, that's traffic.
That's there without being processed.
It just pulled. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay, how do I be responsible for that? Well, I need to then educate that staff person on, look, when you complete something, just let me know so I can check it off my box and not have that traffic in my mind. That's a small thing, but lots of little things. You see parents who their kids run their lives, right? And it's like, okay, how much of that could you bring order to lessen, as a parent, to lessen all the traffic in your own head? And I think as you delete or subtract and lessen the traffic, I think that's also a secret to aging well. And healthy, like longevity, because I think it's that stress that's the ultimate ager. It ages us prematurely.
Yeah. Well, and
Absolutely.
as I'm listening to you talk, one of the things that I'm thinking about is think about from the time you were born to the time that we're whatever age we are now. Can you imagine if everything that we had interacted with or bought or, brought into our environment, if all of it was still there? How, incredibly cluttery. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to move and live, right? And so it's again like this concept of autophagy is giving yourself the space to see what needs to be cleared out, and then the resistance that's created when it's like, this is no longer useful and I need to get it out. And by doing that on a daily basis, you're creating this platform for yourself of clarity so that there's less things around you, so that you are really truly capable of becoming more of who you're meant to be versus what you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And all these things we're doing contribute to that.
Yeah.
And I guess this is my question, is how do you really let go? How do you really let go in your mind, within your physical body, in your physical space of things? It's kind of the same principle in any aspect of your life, but how do you really do it? Because some people really struggle with that. Some people are really good at it. And it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, well, there's the physical universe. If you're living in a lot of clutter, that's probably an indication of some inner clutter. Mm-hmm. And so again, giving things up to get empty, to empty yourself out, empty your cup, empty your space, and find ways that really, and it's a moment to moment. So I'll say it like this. I think most people aren't very good at letting go of stuff. So Buddha had 3 points of suffering for human beings. There were 3 things. I'll just speak to one of them, which is attachment. So mentally, as we're attached to things, that becomes a root of suffering. And so as we start practicing non-attachment, detaching, letting go of things, and again, most human beings have, but it's developing a musculature of letting go, the ability to let go in a moment. You see yourself, someone does something they shouldn't have done. They said something they shouldn't have said.
And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's like things are happening and you tell yourself a story.
Yeah.
And then you react to the story. And so then again, this is creating
step out of the story. Get quick at letting go. If you see you're in going down a rabbit hole, someone does something they shouldn't have done, or they didn't do something they should have done, and then you're getting triggered and you feel your emotional, the upset happening. Just wait, Baron, stop, pause, drop into my body. Just stop, drop in, fall awake, get present. And let the upset start to downset. Mm-hmm. And that's right there. You've just let go of something, but you got your power back. You didn't give away your power.
And that's something you're doing within yourself. So it's really powerful to, grab a drawer, clean it out, right? That does help with your inner world.
Yeah.
But I love what you just said, falling awake. So I'm used to hearing people say fall asleep, but wow, how powerful is that phrase you just used, falling awake? That's an intentional creation of being able to fall into this space awake.
Yeah. That's the practice of working on yourself, right? Getting to know yourself. So Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, really examining and having that moment to moment ability to, pay attention to yourself. Mm-hmm. And as you develop awareness, you start seeing, well, what weakens me in a moment? What takes away my power in a moment? Where am I giving away my power in a moment? And start developing the muscle called let that go. Now, it doesn't mean you become a doormat and just ignore it. Maybe you let go of the upset, you let go of the reactivity, and you immediately feel your whole biochemistry, you feel your nervous system settle down. That's healthy. Right. And now you're more in a centered, you're more present. And now you actually, in my experience, I actually see things more clearly. So same situation, same problems, same challenges, same betrayals or whatever the things, but I have a different view of it. And I then can actually see alternative pathways to take or, to respond to a situation from calm and, if you're upset and you write an email, don't send it kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very,
but you take a pause, right? And you step back and you get your center, it clears your head, and then you see a different pathway to take.
Mm-hmm. And it opens up the creativity that we're all grasping for is, when we're telling ourselves stories, when we have problems, how do we fix it? How do we make it better? And if you can't get out of the story, you don't have those questions to ask yourself that opens up that creativity because you're too cluttered. You're too bogged down.
Yeah. Yeah. A buddy of mine called me this morning and he's really upset. He's going through a difficult breakup and he was really upset and he, wanted to reach out to his ex-girlfriend and all this. And I'm like, dude, just take a pause. I said, here, I'm going to give you a mantra. There's nothing to do, nothing to say, nothing to fix. Just let it be just let it be right now. Just let it be. And then you'll get the clarity of what is the right response that could work for her, works for you. But right now, no response is a good response because you're not right and you're upset. So it's like, give ourselves that pause, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So Baron, what would you say, to somebody who is interested in adopting a yoga practice? What are the steps that they should take? I mean, other than, just getting off their butt and going somewhere. Like what is the
Which
what
can
are the
be really
steps?
hard if you have a story
It can
in your
be.
mind.
That's right.
Right?
And so that's sort of where I'm going, right? Is when you've got somebody who you're trying to help them change their story. How do you talk to them about that?
Yeah. So don't wait till you're ready.
Because you'll be waiting forever.
Yeah, you could be waiting for too long. Yeah. And just do the thing. Emerson said, do the thing and you'll have the power. But it's kind of like that. Like people, I remember when I had one of my own studios, people would say, can I come and just watch a yoga class? And I was like, no, you can't. You won't get it. You have to get the experience of it. You have to get on the mat. You need to move, breathe, go through the rigors of the practice.
You didn't say, yes, you can watch it, and here's your mat.
It's like, we don't watch. There's no watching around here.
Yeah.
Or, I'd be at a dinner party and people would say, well, tell me about, the yoga class and the yoga practice. And say, well, what are you doing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? I'll meet you there. And that'll answer every question you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something you have to do. And then you get the experience of it for yourself. And then you discover for yourself, is there something here for me? Does it shift me? Does it alter my perspective? Does it change how I feel? Does it leave me with more vitality, more freedom, more power, or not? But the only way to really find out if something's going to work for you is try it. And it has to make sense to you. I think, like, if something makes enough sense to me, like there's probably something there for me to maybe learn or at least check out, I know I have to go do it. If it's something a little weird or something, then no, I probably won't. But I think if you feel a calling towards something like yoga practice, just start doing it and do it at least 10 times in the shortest time span as you can. So if you could do 10 practices, 10 classes in 14 days.
Yeah. Like 5 days a week and just really throw yourself into it to really experience it.
Yeah, that'll be the best. And then see what the result is then. I think just 1 time, 2 times, maybe not, but to really get a fuller experience of it and what's available there for you is to actually do it in that way. Like just take it on. It's not a once a week thing. It's really, maybe 3 or 4 days a week. I would recommend 5 days, take a day or 2 off, then another 5 days and see what you're left with. See how you feel like what are the results. I mean, I would say anybody from any walk of life will feel better. You'll feel healthy. You'll just feel stronger. You'll stand taller. You have a little more body confidence. You'll feel lighter, freer, less stress, a little more vitality. No promises, but you will feel something different. Yeah. It's almost like you can't not feel different if you do that.
Which makes a lot of sense when you're exposing your body to a different experience that creates a new foundation.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing also is engaging in something like this if you're feeling the call. So anybody out there listening, have you ever felt I should do yoga? Well, that's a call, right? And we're talking about it now. You're listening. That's probably another ping you're getting to try this. Now, this doesn't mean you have to commit to being a yogi for the rest of your life, but give yourself 2 weeks and really allow your body an immersion experience and see how that changes your life and integrate something brand new to create a new basis of a new default that's going to create more connections within your brain. And that alone can be life-changing. So what I'm hearing is this is really simple. You feel the call, give yourself an immersive experience. And this principle of, how I'm kind of interpreting this could go in any aspect of your life. If when we were talking about earlier, there's too much clutter, some of you might feel, yeah, there's too much clutter in this one room. That's your ping to go and do that. So this is also a practice of really being able to listen to what you're communicating to yourself of what your highest needs are. And so I just love this because I'm really hearing how deep this practice goes in every element of how you've engaged, not just in the yoga world, but in your life. And this is what anybody listening can immediately engage in. Listen, immerse yourself, try it, and then evaluate how that feels. And then, from that point, maybe you do want to go to yoga class once a week. Maybe you want to go once a month. Maybe you want to go 3 times a week. Just kind of listen to what your body's telling you.
Yeah, really good.
So Baron, what do you have coming up? You have anything fun and exciting on your radar in the next month or two?
My podcast, Disrupting the Drift, my podcast on YouTube or on any audio stations.
Yeah, tell us where we can find you, Baron, for more of this wisdom.
Yeah, Disrupting the Drift or Disrupt the Drift on any of the audio podcasts or on YouTube. And then you can check me out on baronbaptiste.com. And in 2025, I'm going to roll out some more trainings and leadership trainings, yoga-based. It's like leadership, but I use meditation, yoga practice as tools for a leader. And I'll say this whole conversation for me kind of sums up to leadership. And because at the end of the day, we lead our own lives.
Yes.
And if you want to lead anyone else, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it begins with yourself, leading yourself, and you are the ceiling, you are the end game, and you can't give what you don't have. So if you want to lead others, you've got to really get intentional and deliberate in leading yourself.
And I would also venture to say that the best way to teach is to live that which you're trying to teach yourself first. And that is the greatest teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be it. Yeah.
I love that.
Wow. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Baron, thanks so much. I am going to be hopping over to the yoga studio. If they had a class now, I'd be already inspired to pop over. But I appreciate it. Thanks for hosting Janae over there. We'll have to have you on one of our wellness retreats for sure. And you can find us online at becomingyoung.io. You can find us on Insta or any of the other platforms, including YouTube, at the Becoming Young podcast. And we look forward to seeing everybody soon. I need to take a moment to remind you that we're not doctors. Our engaging chats, deep insights, and the wealth of knowledge delivered by our guest experts, including doctors, are all designed to empower your journey towards a vibrant life. But it's crucial to note, this isn't medical advice and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. We're here to inspire and inform based on our experiences and the insights of our guests. If you're facing health issues or have medical concerns, always consult a healthcare professional directly. They're your go-to for advice tailored specifically to your individual health needs. Consider our discussions as food for thought on your adventure. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay engaged on your journey to becoming young.